what is the world of work looking for in our learners right now? What characteristics, what individual skills do they need to have to be successful in that space? Problem solving, critical thinking, yes? Creativity, collaboration and teamwork, grit, resilience, empathy. And one of the most important things is curiosity as well. Right, you've all passed the tests. Now we can get to the real questions. So my question to you is, are we qualified to teach that to students? Are we qualified to do that? Which module in our teaching degrees taught us to do that? Is it possible to teach people to do that?
Facilitator.
Depends if they're willing to learn. Yeah?
You know, they always say we facilitators are not teachers, so that they don't feel that you're lecturing them, that you're next to them.
So what I'd like you to do, just, there's a lot of conflicting answers here, a lot of different opinions. Just keep that in your mind as we're talking through this process today. There's a lot of terminology from the keynote speaker this morning that is expanded on this and added to that process. So we'll bring that in and refer to it as we need to go, as we're going along as well. I think one of the other questions before we move on to the big question is, how do we know that this is what the workplace needs? I think we need to apply critical thinking skills instead of just going, right, we'll be part of the sausage machine, etc. So how do we know that this is what is needed? Yeah?
I don't think we know what is needed, but we know what kind of person we are looking for, someone that can be adaptable.
Yes.
I think that's the key.
So I think you're right, it's about what we've reflected on in our own journeys, as it were, as adults in this space, and engaging with technology and the workplace as it is. But we've also been told in TED Talks, who hasn't watched a TED Talk on what the future looks like? No? You've all watched them. So we've been told what it looks like, and traditionally the education system has always provided the workers for the future. At some point we need people who don't think, they just do what they're told, and that was what, you know, the Industrial Revolution needed in the product lines to build cars, etc. But now we've seen that AI is going to take over a lot of this. So the big real question is the same one that was posed this morning, is how do we interpret this into schools and the learning experience? And I'm assuming that you want the answer to this question, and that's why you're sitting here at this conference. That's why we're coming to the tech conferences. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little story, and I think it might answer, your answer to this and your gut feeling on it might give you some suggestion as to where you stand on the integration of technology. You might have had this experience as well. So my math teacher was teaching the grade 4s and 5s some maths and took them up into the computer lab because we've got hour-long lessons. So we'd done the presentation, they'd done all the work, and there was about 50 minutes left, so let's go and do some skill building on the computer, the road stuff. And one of the games, one of the kids was doing very well in, we call him Johnny, and he got to a level 15, 20, I don't know what it was, and he just couldn't get it right. The rest of his classmates were 7, 8 going through it on time, and eventually after, 5 minutes of doing this, he said to the teacher, "Can I hack this?" And the teacher took a moment and went, "Hack? What do you mean? What would you like to do?" He said, "Well, I'd like to go on to Google and find out how to solve this problem." So the teacher right there took a breath and said, "Sure." Onto YouTube, did some research. 2 minutes later, he got through the process. So some of you might be thinking, but that's cheating. Some of you might be thinking, that's what we're teaching them. So what are your thoughts on that process? What happened right there?
Good for him.
Good for him. Did he give up? No, he tried it. Frustration led him to going, I need to solve this problem. So if in your mind you're saying, he's hacked it, it's cheating, it's not fair, then this is not what this conference is about, especially if we've taught them those skills. Am I correct? So part of that is I have a problem, and how am I going to solve it? So by way of introduction, now that we have the big question in our head, how we are going to get technology meaningfully into and integrated into schools. Why am I having a talk with you today? Who am I? So I was introduced as Gershom Aitchison. I'm the headmaster and co-founder of Education Incorporated. It's a boutique school in Fourways. And we have the privilege of one class per grade. We go from grade 4 to grade 12. And we're an IB private registered school, much like where we're sitting today, just very small. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is, and it says small classes. It allows us to be nimble. It allows us to implement things quite quickly. But I don't believe that the size of the school and what we have to offer limits what can be done in the classroom space. So Jax, my wife, and I own the school, and we've been going for 7 years. And if anyone has put matrics through matrics, you'll know that you age about 5 years for every one real year. And what we're very passionate about is asking the question of the TED world, where the problem has been stated very clearly, what is the solution? Because I'm not seeing that solution, and often the people telling us what they need are not educators. All they're doing is pointing fingers at us. Do you feel the same way? So what it looks like for us in exploring this space is exposing our students to what the workplace of the future looks like. And you do that by taking them to future thinking companies and inviting people who are thinking about the future and are relevant and that can connect with the kids to the school to come and talk to them. Because we're small, we often get into, or we are presented with opportunities that a lot of big schools don't have that opportunity for, but you can still use them and look for them. So it may be going to Anglo-American CEL, which is the Center for Experiential Learning, and teaching them about process thinking and solving problems. Big schools don't get that opportunity. It means taking them to the Silicon Valley of Europe, which is Dublin, and actually going into Twitter and Facebook. It's going into Twitter and Facebook and spending time in those companies, not just walking around with the waving tour, but spending time in the cafeterias at lunch talking to the employees. And what the most amazing thing about those places are, the people are curious who work there and they want to talk to students. It's not, oh, students are disturbing me. They want to find out their story and why they're sitting there. And then the kids get to ask them the real questions. And what we heard this morning is that it's not just about the tertiary education, it's about the path that people have walked and how they've tailored that path to get where they want to be. It is very prestigious to work at Facebook and Twitter and Google. And often you have to tailor your path to get there. And that's something the kids need to hear. Part of this process is also establishing connections. It's about reaching out to people who share the same vision and think the same way you do and inviting them to come and talk to the kids. It could be Tupten, the Buddhist monk who advises Google and Facebook and goes around talking to these big tech companies about mindfulness and about the empathy that we're talking about. Because it's not just about the tech, it's about the human relation that's getting lost in that process as well. The kids need to see it as real, and they need to be able to ask their questions. So in order to facilitate the technology in school and the integration of technology, we've created a framework. And you might be nodding. If you don't know what some of the terminology is, just put your hands up and I'll explain. So our approach to integrating technology in the school has been SAM-R. Are we all familiar with SAM-R? So SAM-R is a framework that is used for the integration of technology in corporations and in schools. Simulation is the S, augmentation, modification and redefinition. So it moves up in a scale, much like Bloom's taxonomy, into creating something new and doing something different. Now, our approach has always been, how do we use technology to improve the learning experience? Because if you can't improve the learning experience, why are we doing it? And how are we using technology to make our administration and the burden of that easier? How can we use technology to collaborate better as teachers and things like that as well? Does that explain SAM-R to you guys? So we're a school, so Vuma gives us a 1 gig line. And if Vuma runs past you and you don't have a 1 gig line, ask them, they will do it for free. We have G Suite, which gives you an exabyte of space. And that's a lot of space. It's 1 billion gigabytes. Try and break that. And our children have tried a lot to break a gigabyte of bandwidth and all that space. But it means within that space, you've got the backup automatically in place. One of the biggest risks for teachers and students is work getting lost, laptops being stolen, etc. You can walk out with that laptop right now, work carries on at the next workstation. So there's that element too. And in terms of collaboration with your students, they're not walking around with flash drives that could have viruses and things on them. They put their stuff in their team folders and you can see and share and collaborate. So that's the main framework. Then within that, we've looked at what we call spaces and functions. So spaces are what we learned this morning is about creating learning environments where the kids can engage with things, and we'll talk about that. And then in functions, we have the teacher functions, which is the administration, the annual teaching plans, all of that kind of thing, and the learner's function, how they are using the technology to learn and access information and content. It is an ever-evolving space, but that's a general framework. Does anyone have any questions on that? Does that make sense? So if you came and visited us, I would say to you, this is a classroom, and this is a space. Anybody can book out a space, including the students. It's on the Google Calendar, that is the school's calendar, and you create a room, you book it down, book it out, and then it's not available to anybody else. And we've done that with our 3D printer as well, because even though it's not a space, it's a resource that requires time. Okay. So what kind of spaces have we created for the learners to engage so that their function is taking place? Again, right. So one of the things that I noticed when we were in Google 2 years ago was that they have their common work area, and then they have these different themed spaces that people can book out and they can go. If it's an amphitheater, if you're doing a presentation. If it's an analog room where you're doing hands-on stuff with a 3D printer or the etcher, or if you're actually printing cards and things like that, you can go and do it there. It's about having a Lego wall when you just want to time out to go and play with Lego on the wall and things like that. So when we came back from Dublin, I said, right, the science lab, which was a classroom, needs to become a space. So we have to build a classroom to replace that, because other teachers need access and students need access to that. It was about creating the garage, which you see up there, which is deliberately quite gritty, but it gives the sense of we can build and create things here. And garage in the tech space has got a very nice connotation with Amazon and Google and Apple and Microsoft. It all started there. You can't see it in here, but there's different heights of desks. There's a TV in there. It's got a whiteboard that can write on the walls, that can be raised, etc. But the kids know they can go in there at break if you're part of the robotics club and you can build. If you want to book the 3D printer, you can go in there and you can print. The laptops are there for you to use as you need to, and even the technical drawing, the EGD, happens in that space. Then there's two new additions. The first is that at the beginning of the year, we were approached by Matrix Warehouse saying that they've started an esports league. Who knows what esports are? Most of you know what esports are. Gaming as a sport. Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Esports.
E-sport.
Yes. So, esports sounds like laser tag. It isn't. It's basically computer games. And they've created a massive place on the corner of Rivonia and Witkoppen, 150 seats where you can go and have a big LAN party, but it's competitive. It's sponsored. The school can win 40,000 Rand and the individual learner 40,000 Rand. So, of course, the students are very excited about that. That's like first team rugby in the geek space. It's hectic. So, sir, can we have computers? So, as part of the process and our philosophy and vision I said, of course you can have the computers. How much is it going to cost? I have an old Bitcoin miner at home with 6 very big graphics cards, so we can talk about putting that in. Where's the money coming from? Because it's not on the budget. So one of them created an Excel spreadsheet, put it in his team folder, shared it, put his budget in his view, did some research on it, and I then went in and tinkered and made a comments folder, comments column in it next to it. I then went to Matrix Warehouse with it. I said, can you do us better? And they look after us. So they gave us the quote, and we managed to build 4 high-end gaming PCs for 24,000 Rand because we had the graphics cards. So I then went to them and I said, right, guys, I have the components. I've spoken to Mr. Kennedy and Mrs. Aitchison. The school has agreed to loan you the money. They mean, what do you mean loan us the money? I said, it's not in the budget and there's a prize. So you guys have to earn this back, and we all find sponsorships for this money. So that led into a conversation about the school's non-profit organization and 18A tax certificates and what does sponsorship look like and what can you provide and what can the school give in advertising and what do sponsors want. I then said, well, we've got all the components because you have to now build it. And that's one of the pictures which keeps going off. Sorry. So on midterm break, they came in one day. All the pieces were sitting in front of them, and I said, build. The only thing that I did was put the CPU in with the glue so that they didn't bend the pins the wrong way. The rest of it they did themselves. And there was and the most finicky part of building a PC is about getting the front LED lights and the switches to work. Because you have to read very carefully on how that works. If you get it wrong, the LEDs don't work, it doesn't break anything. But one of the most interesting comments through the day was, I wonder if this will switch on when we put it on. I wonder if when we plug it in, if it's going to work. And I kept saying, why wouldn't it work? And they're going, well, we've never done this before. I said, are you following the instructions? Yes. I said, then I'm sure it's going to be fine. What it did was it created ownership for them. The guys that worked on their PCs named the PCs. There's a lot more appreciation for when working on the gaming PCs now. They look after it a lot better, and they've built something at school. So in the holidays, we have them at school because our admin staff are still there. They log on and there's team training happening in the holidays because you don't have to be at school to do that. So without even attempting to put all of those things in place, collaboration, thinking about the bigger picture, working together, working remotely, it's all starting to happen in that space. There's budgeting and all of that's happening. And all I didn't know what it looked like. Esports, I don't even know where it's going to go. We haven't even had our first competition. But I said, this is what it looks like. Let's go. What's the worst that can happen? Guys, what's the worst that can happen if you give them that space? What are they going to do? Tell me, what's going to happen?
Steal the stuff.
Steal the stuff. We've got cameras everywhere and the kids know that. So, yeah.
They're going to use their creative minds and explore, because there's no, so they're going to work as a team.
The worst that can happen is that a PC gets dropped, a bit of RAM gets broken, or we have to replace a hard drive. That's what insurance is for. So there's no real downside to creating that space. The biggest challenge as a teacher is what? Sitting back and watching it happen. And the chaos that happens. And all that I had to do was moderate the way that they spoke to each other and interacted with each other. Because while teachers can't call a kid stupid, they call each other retards without even thinking twice. What the follow-on effect has been is that within the week I had donations from parents for HDMI monitors, mouses, sponsorships of 1,000 Rand here or there, and 3 kids coming to say, "Sir, I know how much these PCs cost. My dad thinks it's a great deal. He says I can have one, so can we please build it?" So that now it's expanding, and I've done nothing except just kind of create the space for that to happen. So what the rest of what we're going to talk about right now is, and I'd like some people to share as well, is how do we create those spaces, take what the keynote speaker spoke about this morning and make it real, waving the magic wand. But I'd like to also challenge your thoughts on a few things as well. Sorry, I didn't talk about the last space. The last space that we've created was what we called the TED room. So I kicked Mr. Kennedy, my ops manager, out of his office because it had a curved wall, perfect for video and for a TED space, and moved him next door. Put up, there's a big 50-inch TV, there's a computer with 2 monitors, there's a podcast mic that's sitting there, there is an HD video camera that's mounted to the wall, and there's benches that the kids can come and sit. When I created the TED room, because that's what feels like it's a space that the kids might use, creating YouTube videos and that, and if you think, when I spoke to Jax about it, she said, well, the teachers will never use it. I said, it's not for the teachers. I said, half the school is already generating content on YouTube. Let's teach them how to do it and add the quality and the value to it and just moderate what's actually going out there so they know how to do it properly. The same thing with the podcasts. And then suddenly, a month later, we hear about a thing called Tech Ed, which is the TED Ed, which is TED Talks for schools. And suddenly we have the space that now suddenly we can start using in that space and teaching the kids the skills that need to happen. So sometimes it's not about what you're going to do with the space. It's just about creating it. If you build it, will they come? If we create space, and if anyone's redone a kitchen and has put in all those extra cupboards that they don't know what they're going to put in there, and a year later they're going, I need more space, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. So here's one quick question. What is the fastest way to populate an Excel spreadsheet? If I wanted information and all of you to collaborate on an Excel spreadsheet and give me data, what is the quickest way for me to do that? Spot on. Well done. Virtual fist pump. It's Google Forms because it can be translated into an Excel spreadsheet and then you can dataize that with graphs and things like that. And that's the power of being able to use the technology in that space. That was just a little quick hint or tip. So coming back to the big question on how do we involve it in the school, I think we need to come back to, can we teach curiosity, creativity, teamwork? And what does that look like? And I think to answer that question, we have to understand where that comes from. I don't believe we can teach curiosity. I don't believe we can teach teamwork. I don't believe we can teach creativity. And I don't believe we can teach problem solving. So if I make that statement, what are we doing? So where does curiosity come from?
I think we've got to present them with opportunities to feel it.
Okay. So
How can we do this? And then, like you say, let go. Sit back and let's see. What did I do with it? Where did I go from it? Okay, but what's going to happen because of that? What's going to give them those questions and allow them to question for themselves the ifs and the whats and the whens and the hows and the whys. This, then that.
okay.
Giving them opportunity to feel like being curious is okay.
Okay. And so it's curiosity needs to be done in the same space. But what sparks that curiosity?
One another, we all do.
Okay. So what in you sparks the curiosity? Okay.
Things around you, like things that you've seen and things that you need in your life. Things that,
It's got to come from them.
yeah,
Absolutely.
providing opportunities.
So what is the teacher's role in it?
Give them the opportunity.
You spoke about it in your presentation in the 3D printing and what you're doing at St. Stithians with the grade 6s and 7s. What are the teachers doing there?
It's facilitating
But what are they facilitating?
their curiosity.
Their curiosity. You see, kids, their minds and what they pick. I mean, anyone's bought musical instruments for their kid who wants to play the piano. How long did that last? Or the guitar? That's curiosity at work. I want to try it and see if it works and something that I want to make part of who I am. But it starts with a passion. It's the teacher's passion. So you can't promote curiosity when you're a dead fish about it. Does that make sense? And maybe the teacher needs to fake the passion to pique the curiosity. Does that make sense?
I mean, even if you just give them a box on the table,
They're like cats.
that's piquing curiosity.
Yeah.
What do you think, Sneh? What do you think
Yeah.
would be aware of?
Yeah. And sometimes it shouldn't feel like learning. Because I don't want to learn. I don't need to learn. I don't want to do another lesson. So sometimes it should feel like something that's fun as well. So let's talk about creativity. How can you teach creativity? Magic wand, you will be creative. I mean, creativity is part of problem solving. How do we generate this creativity in people? I mean, where has the best creativity come from in the history of man, etc.? My opinion, it's about when we have to express ourselves and emotions in a complex fashion that we can't always talk about. It's about solving complex problems that the tools that we have are not sufficient. And that's when we get creative. Would you guys agree with that? Does anyone want to challenge that? Add to it?
You've got to give them the tools to be able to try something different. I mean, you've got a 3D printer, you know, and the kids, when they start the process, like, what on earth do we do with this?
Yeah.
You know, what must I print? And you're like, well, what do you need? What do
You want,
what
yes.
Do you know? And then slowly that starts to open up their thinking and they end up designing for themselves, and not for me.
Absolutely. And you also have to give them permission to do that. Can we do that? Are we allowed to do it? One of the biggest obstacles to actually happening is, we're allowed to use the 3D. Of course you can. But what are the rules? Don't break it. That's the rule. So it's about giving that permission to be able to do that and say we do have constraints, but we can overcome that. So how do we teach teamwork and collaboration?
Giving them the opportunity to be a teamwork and to collaborate and to work together.
So one of the most interesting takeaways from my Dublin tour 2 years ago, and we did one at the beginning of this year as well, but we didn't attend, was this whole teamwork thing came up amongst the students. They absolutely hate doing teamwork at school. Absolutely hate it. And when having the conversation about why the teamwork doesn't work, well, this one doesn't do his part, and I don't know what this is, and this and the next thing, Teamwork is about relationships. And I think any relationship works when honesty is in place, when there's trust, when there's acceptance and tolerance, and there's no judgment. So those are things that we can encourage and teach. But most importantly, to be a good team player, you need to be able to give good criticism and feedback. And most importantly, you need to know how to receive good criticism and feedback. Otherwise, it's just a one-way road. So in my mind, in the conversations that I'm having with our students and the opportunities we're providing, and you'll know this with working with kids, it's he said, she said, I don't like this. It's about stop. You can hold two opposing ideas in your mind and not go mad and respect somebody who you don't necessarily agree with. And when somebody said that, this is what they meant, and then you can coach on how to give the feedback appropriately and how to receive it constructively as well. And the last thing for me is about problem solving. How do you teach problem solving? How did you guys learn to solve problems? The only way to learn to solve problems is to solve problems. And there's some problems that you can't solve and you'll need to ask for help, and that's part of building your toolbox. But solving problems teaches you to solve problems. Do you guys agree with that? But the key to being a successful learning process, and I know that some of you have been sitting in this hall when we did the learning pit at the beginning of this year, is that it can't be artificial. We can't create artificial environments to create success. It has to be real, and it has to be hard. Otherwise, there is no learning. And if it isn't hard, it's not really a problem. It's just something we do. Does that make sense? So in asking these questions, and this is part of the self-reflection process that we've gone through in terms of how to get technology in the school and create an authentic space, because it's not just about the space, but how the kids are thinking about it in that space and the freedom that comes with that. So how are you doing it in your schools? How are you integrating that? And how are you changing your thinking so that the kids' thinking can change, so that it's less limiting? I think the biggest challenge for all of us is control. The fear of losing control. Am I right? We the teachers, we know. Someone said about being facilitators these days. What does it mean to be an effective facilitator in this space and still have a teaching and learning environment? Some of you might be saying, it doesn't work for maths and it doesn't work in this subject and I can't do it in high school and my school has budget restrictions, etc. We're a small school. We don't have the budget that any of you guys have, but we can still create those spaces. So one of the big bold steps that we took this year, and I don't know where it's going, I know what the path looks like right now, is that I decided in the grade 7, 8 and 9 phase at the school, technology and creative arts will no longer be examinable subjects. Done. And I know it's in line with Red Hill's philosophy on assessment and things like that too. One, because a formal assessment on creative arts sounds like an oxymoron to me, and there's better ways to demonstrate that you've understood concepts. And while there's value in being able to build bridges and shelters with ice cream sticks and plastic bags, I don't know where that fits into what the kids need to know. So first step was grade 7, 8 and 9 will do technical drawing, the very basics of it, and include some AutoCAD in it, one of them a semester, so that they're getting an idea of what that design feels like. If they want to take it further, they can, but it's very likely that whatever they're going to do, they will design it on a computer. And it leads into Tinkercad and things like that as well. Then the next part of it was, one semester they are going to be working with the Ev3 Robots, and it doesn't matter if it's the main robot, if it is the renewable energy, or if it's going to be the pneumatics, because the renewable energy and pneumatics falls into the general scope of the curriculum with the gearing and all of that. But I don't know how you learn about that when you're reading it in a book, because if you're not seeing the gears moving, you know that if there's 2 gears, they move in opposite directions. If there's 3, the other one will move in the same direction as the one in the beginning. And then the last thing is, and this is what the grade 9s are doing right now, and I'm going to walk you through that to show that how we've made it applicable, is the grade 9s this semester are building a Raspberry Pi. And all I did was I went to them and I said, right, we are building a Raspberry Pi. Half the class went, wow, yay. Another class went, why are we baking in technology? So that's the skill gap within the classroom. And I said, a Raspberry Pi is the world's smallest computer. Left it at that. And I said, your task and the first 3 steps on your rubric are very simple. There are 8 of you in the class. I would like you to all come back with a presentation of what Raspberry Pi project you would like to do. And I want the budget, what it's going to cost, and where I can get it. And it doesn't matter if I have to import it from overseas. That was it. So the first day they arrived with their flash drives and plugging it into the teacher's computer and showing everything that's going on. And I said, right, the next time we do this presentation, it'll be in your Google Drive on the team folder. That was the first part of the rubric in the second part of the big rubric. We listened to all the presentations and they pitched their ideas. Some of them are very passionate about them. So it was a Steam console, a retro gamer, a world clock, an Etch-a-Sketcher, a basic PC, and I can't even remember the last ones. Said, right, we're going to do 4 of them. Vote on the 4. Voted on the 4 that we are building with the budget in place. I said, now find a teammate. So they paired off with their friends, and I said to them, that doesn't work because both of you are not complementing each other with skills. You have exactly the same skill set. So rearrange. So they rearranged their teams, and guess what? With that direction, they came up with a team that complements. One has never done it before, but is very good with admin and did all the quotes and things like that. Then I said, right, the second part of this process is now that you've got your teammate, go back and figure out your timelines, who's going to do what, because part of that process, and the biggest part of that process for me, was teaching fastest path to experience and what prototyping looks like. Because if their project wasn't going to work, I wanted them to ditch it so we can get the next one going. And kids have this thing about doing projects and it's perfect and then they find out it's not working. And that's one of the big things that Google wants. They'll pay their teams, if they've got an idea, $1 million rather to drop the idea if it doesn't work than spend 50 million pushing a project that doesn't work. And then the second part of that is, what are the iterations? Once you've prototyped it and it's worked, what are the iterations you need? You forgot to order this. This wasn't on the YouTube video. This has been updated. What are those iterations? Do they prevent you? Is it a red light, green light again? That was put on a rubric. There's about 30 lines of the rubric. And in the column, there's a comments column. And it's a shared document. It's an open document. And the kids are commenting, is this what you're looking for, sir? Here's the link. That's promoting the collaboration and understanding. And part of that rubric is the deadlines. That's how we've implemented. I did not tell them what project they had to do. And they've come up with 4 that are very different and excites them. And now they're talking about, if we finish this early, can we do a second one? Does that make sense? So how do we give a mark? How do we mark something like that? What are you guys feeling on it? How do you mark it? How do you give marks? How do you put something on a report? There needs to be, you have done the job, the good job, or not done the good job. And if the kid has followed all the steps and it doesn't work, have they not done a good job or not? If they've canned it because the prototype didn't work, do they get less marks or more marks? What does it look like? It's about the learning process. So I don't want them to be taught that failure is bad. But if you're going to fail, do it early and learn from it. If it's not going to work, do it early and learn from it. And the funniest thing is when it comes to working with tech, we see it in the robotics, we see it in building the 3D printer, because when we bought the 3D printer for the school, I said, I'm not building it, you guys build it. I sat there to make sure they didn't lose screws and have spare bits at the end of it. Was that they own it, they will fail, they put the wrong screws in the wrong place, they will do it, but it's not failure to them, it's just part of the iteration. So how we've decided to market is, first and foremost, if it works as you envisioned and as you presented, you've got full marks. If you don't follow the process to get to the end, you're not going to get full marks. And if it doesn't look like what you planned, but you followed the process in terms of prototyping and iteration, you will still get full marks. Because it's about the end result. It's not about necessarily how well you did it on a scale. Does that make sense? And at the end of the day, my feeling is the real world wants to know, can you do your job or you're not doing it? You're doing it or not? So I've given you a couple of examples, and I hope they're meaningful examples of how we're actually doing it in that space. And I don't know that 8 kids is the limiting factor on that. The limiting factor was, I don't know what this process necessarily looks like, but I know what the end result is. And the only restriction on that is, it happens in 1 semester. What has been the result in the classroom? What do you think, how do you think the kids are approaching this and dealing with it? Sorry? Why are they loving it? It's theirs. Who's controlling it? They are. I deliberately did not put in the rubric that you get marks for being on time and the deadline. Because the deadline is non-negotiable. That's when it has to be done by. The workplace does not need people that keep pushing it out. It's not giving you a mark for getting it done properly, because then it's saying, if you don't get it, it's fine, you know, I can live with that much pain. That's not even part of the question. The kids are driving the process. The emails that I get, the excitement I get, the links that I'm getting, the updated, this is what I saw someone doing with it. What is my role as the teacher? How much heavy lifting am I doing? I walk into a class that I want to teach, and I'm a real teacher, because I'm not understanding this little bit. I can sit down and I can explain it and do the research, the real stuff. Or before I've even got there, someone else says, I know how to do that, and they are helping their peers do it as well. Once that ball gets rolling in a school, it has a cascade effect, because now the creative arts teacher is doing the same thing, and the grade 9's creative arts this year is all about visual, it's about acting and drama. So in the first term they did their drama, which was a play, and then she said, right, that play is now going to become a screenplay, now go and adapt it and start looking at the visual shots. And guess what, the grade 8s have to do fashion design, so they're going to make your costumes that you're going to have to sit with and figure out how this all works. And suddenly it becomes, and they are just going at it. Well, where's the kids at break? No, they're busy working on this and they're busy tinkering with that. Where do you hear that happening? In the holidays. So is anyone going to be in the workshop on the holidays? Because I'd like to go in and work on this. That's how you know when you've created the space, in my mind, that it's actually working. What do you guys think about that? Does it work for you? Do you think it's playable? Maybe. So, what I'd like to share with you before we go into the last 10 minutes, which I'd like to just do the magic one moment, is that I thought what I'd do is just share my thought bibliography with you on where this is all coming from, so that you're not saying this is a lone mad voice in the desert talking, you know, the madman. So the first thing happened, and I know some of you guys were there was a hands-on tech workshop last year, and an MIT prof who was very involved with developing Ev3 was there. And one of the things that stuck through that whole process, he asked this question. He said, how do you know that a creative process has been successful? Come on, guys, you were there. How do you know that a creative process has been successful?
When I want to do it again.
Almost. It's by the number of different results and solutions that you get. If you've got a multiple of solutions, then it's been a proper constructive process of creativity. Then the next one was listening in this traffic as we do to an audiobook on how Google works in 2017. And one of the things, there were many things that stuck out in that book, but one of them was we focus on hiring people who are smarter than us. And I think as teachers, we need to recognize that these oaks are smarter than us and not be threatened by it. Because it's what they're going to invent and create that is going to make our old age comfortable. Does that make sense? And recognize that little Johnny is way smarter than you will ever be, and your job is just to direct and guide and facilitate so that he doesn't go to the dark side, that his moral compass is still appropriate. Does that make sense? Number 3, there was a talk at Gibbs in 2015, and Samir Raji from O School, a former Google employee, spoke about the fastest path to experience, the power of prototyping in terms of teaching positive failure. And failure is not a bad word. Just contextualize it in a better way. Then the Think Education Conference that happened earlier this year about the Learning Pit, and other similarly themed conferences about it being difficult and it having to be real and challenging to be meaningful. And often as teachers, we like to play the role of rescuer because it makes us feel good. But you feel way better when they've struggled a little bit and got the result on their own. They certainly will. And then the last one was at the International Headmasters Conference in Cape Town in 2017, Fred Swaneker, who is the CEO and founder of African Leadership Academy. He said he gives his students a challenge, and his focus of his academy/university is do not create a major, create your mission. Your subjects are put together on what you want to do to change the world. And I think that speaks into what we understand as being tailoring your learning experience for what you want to do in life. One single BA degree, BSc, etc. is not going to define what you are going to do. So I'd like to share this. Who are the math teachers in this room? Yeah, so I've hired some very, very smart math teachers over my course of my teaching and headmaster years, and I'm sitting in training, and there's an Axi sitting there. There's a guy doing his master's in applied mathematics, and he puts his hand up and he says, Gersh, what's the difference between a BA degree and a Debonairs pizza? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, a Debonairs pizza can feed a family of 4. So I said to him, that's very interesting. I said, but just remember, it's a BA degree that's paying your salary. And he went, touche. And I use it as an illustration that it doesn't matter what the path is. If you know where you're going and you've skilled yourself for it, you can do it. So the exercise I'd like to do in the last 10 minutes relates to this. I recently listened to a podcast, Brian Chesky, who is the CEO or founder of Airbnb. And they were talking about a process they followed in terms of the 11-star accommodation experience. You're getting 11 stars, you know, the United Arab Emirates is pushing it with their 6-star hotels. So what is 11-star? And it's a process that I'd like you to start thinking about. It's essentially waving a magic wand. And it ended up in iterations that an 11-star experience for a B&B person may be, at the airport, Elon Musk is waiting there and drives you to where you're going. But on the way, he says, let's just stop, and he's Tesla, by the way, and on the way there, we're just going to stop, and I've arranged coffee with Richard Branson, and we're going to go up into the stratosphere, and you can feel what weightlessness feels like, and have that experience of a little bit of space travel. And you're going to be an hour late for checking in, but when you arrive there, you're greeted. Everything that you have put as your favorites has been accommodated. It's been loaded on what you want to watch. That might be the 11-star experience. Is it realistic? Does it matter? The point is, it takes your mind to a space where there are concrete things around us. If rearranged in a different way, can create a different experience. So what I'd like to do is just ask you to spend the next 5 minutes talking amongst each other and just sharing. If you could wave a magic wand, resources are not an issue. There's nothing about, it's a magic wand. It's the genie moment. What can you do in your classroom and in your school right now to create what you believe is the perfect space to do what we've discussed this morning? What can you do right now? There's a parting message I'd like to give before we finish. Just throw what the big thing, one or two big things that you could do right now.
Drop the curriculum.
Drop the curriculum, right?
Collapse the timetable.
Collapse the timetable. So you want a little bit more deep dive and less. So do you all come from private schools? So do you have the power to do that? This table, squeaky wheel gets the grease, I'm just saying. And from this table?
Assessment was
Yeah?
the way we assess.
Yeah? I hear Ray's voice very loudly in that.
I haven't said a word.
I'm just saying.
So it was interesting it came up.
Yeah.
It was interesting it came up.
You're 100% right. We need to assess differently. It is a very artificial process, and it's not that, oh, it's the stress and the anxiety it creates. It just doesn't deliver on what we know.
My issue, and what I said was, if I could change something, it would be the end, as in getting into varsity. Because that's what's forcing teachers to teach the way that they are. So there's the trick results and the trick, children need to get into varsity.
Yeah.
And I like what you said somewhere along the whole thing was, is university going to be imperative? You know, people are not looking for teachers that have degrees. So I think if we knew where the end was going and where life was taking these children, we could eradicate assessment altogether.
So one of the things that we have kind of thrown around a little bit as an idea, but haven't fully implemented yet because there's so much happening, is, does one term look like a Udemy course or an online course to teach the kids what lifelong learning feels like and how easy it is to access it? Doesn't mean that we add in our FET phase or from grade 7 to 9 or grade 7 to 11, that part of your LO mark is you've presented yourself with a 6-month certificate that you studied online and anything you want. And the school pays the $10 for that to happen. Because that's a skill that they really need to do. So that's something we're exploring as well. And my job is also just to facilitate what you're doing, make a commitment. If you don't like it, they normally give you a trial period of 2 weeks or something to change. Just do that because that's real and important as well.
That's what we kind of said, like a homeschooling program for each child where the teacher's just there.
Yeah. This table?
I think what the difference between our actual classrooms and this no boundaries classroom is, well, the fact that there's no boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we discussed is why are there boundaries? If the kid, I told them when we draw on Tinkercad and they want to print a jet, I tell them, no, you can't print a jet. But why? Print a jet. Okay, no, the jet doesn't work. Why doesn't it work?
Yeah.
No, you need to break it into smaller components. I could do that.
Yeah.
So actually the limitlessness and saying, why not? Let's explore why, if you can or can't do whatever you want to do and stop saying, no, this is what I want you to do.
Yeah. No, agreed.
I think that's what you're saying, the change comes, it's not the budget or the timetable constraints, it's us, and stop saying no.
No, absolutely.
That growth mindset.
Can we figure
Yeah.
this out? Okay, let's try, how do we do it?
I promise you guys.
Also, maybe, I mean, I haven't thought of this new
No, work it out. You're like,
Guys, trust me,
not break it, work it out.
if you would like to enjoy and be teachers for the rest of your life, you have to do this because you start enjoying teaching again and it becomes fulfilling and rewarding again. So my final words and my final thoughts on this are, there's intentional, so we put all of this in place so that they learn, we create a space and we mentor them through problem solving, creative thinking, teamwork, collaboration, all of those things that we just spoke about. But there are unintended consequences in this process as well. The hidden curriculum, and that's just as important. And those things look like, to me, like motivation and self-motivation. The ability to see something in your mind and actualize it. Because actualization is a very, very important skill. A lot of people can see it, but they can't make it real. They talk a lot, but it just stays in that space. It teaches them control. It teaches them independence of thought. It teaches the critical thinking that goes with it. There's excitement. There's excitement about learning. It teaches them grit, which is important. And most importantly, it gives them ownership. Gives them ownership over their learning. And I think that's one of the most important things. To be successful in the future and in future thinking companies, they need to own where they're going and how they skill themselves. Guys, thank you for being such a receptive audience. I hope you found value in what we discussed this morning. It's about planting those seeds and creating the conversation, I think. And hopefully I gave you some realistic, practical examples of what we're doing. My final word is eduinc.co.za. We have very good coffee. I didn't make this practical because you need to be in those spaces to see and feel what it's like. Come and see that what I'm describing is actually happening and it's not just lip service. It's an open invitation. Okay? Thanks very much.